I'm overjoyed to connect with you, Ke'oni, and grateful for the opportunity to share with my audience your embodied wisdom and your passion for awakening the primordial, most natural way of being to help us navigate the madness in current times. Welcome.
Mahalo. Thank you so much for this invitation, Julia. I'm equally as excited to have this conversation with you. And I'm, reminded of our degrees of separation with our mutual friends like Heather Ensworth. And so it's so great that you and I have this opportunity to have this conversation together.
Yes, I appreciate Heather Ensworth for introducing us and for opening the door that allows us, in my perspective, to learn from the awakened descendant of Mu people. So for those that are new to or are first time meeting you, Ke'oni Hanalei comes from a lineage that carries its memories 1017 generations back. I cannot even comprehend the years, how long this lineage is. And they carried the memories through the song, through the stories, in deep reverence for the most natural way and order of existence. And the wisdom that Ke'oni so generously shares is recognized as pre-Polynesian, older than ancient Hawaii. So the family is recognizing, or the name that Ke'oni's family holds for their deep ancestors is Mu, which is most often referred to in our society as ancient Lemuria. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, sister.
Thank you for dedicating your life to helping us awaken our own access to deep ancestral wisdom and love.
Oh, wow. Mahalo. It's such a joy to be able to share in the extraction of aloha, of love with one another. And for you to say that, I'm so grateful for you to acknowledge that. Mahalo.
My pleasure. So today we come together to talk about the immense potential of the spinal column. I had a deep sense that you are able to access the higher octave of the information that is stored inside the spinal column. It's a living library of all our ancestors. And in my work, I was always guided with the clients over the many years through regression hypnosis, healing hypnosis, and through metaphysical anatomy healing. We were always guided to tap to the denser energetics inside the bones to address the energetical knots of ancestral trauma that was conditioning our body in a limiting way. And only after we resolved and dissolved those energetical knots, as I said, then we were instantly, immediately, naturally guided to tap into the deep ancestral coding of the most natural way of being, which is fully connected to all that is, at peace, and just able to navigate life in this rich, abundant, prosperous way, feeling very safe in our human body. So I would love to hear from you, Ke'oni. How did your journey start with accessing the records, the memories of your ancestors in your own spinal column, and perhaps how that journey then led you to creating a beautiful body of work that is available on your website? And we'll talk about that in more detail. Where would you like to start?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I would love to just speak on behalf of what you had shared about 1017 generations, which spans 20,000 years to the year 18,000 BC. And my grandmother, Kawiki Onalani, she was a well-known makaula or mystic on the island of Maui. And she had received a lot of the doctrines or the memories that has been preserved through each of these generations. And I was so fortunate to be hanai or to be formally adopted in a way by my grandmother so that I could receive that information and that memory as well. As much as my grandmother taught me, her role was really as someone who reminded me. And one of the things that she reminded me is something that has been preserved in our lineage for 20,000 years. And it's something called ulu. And ulu is a breathing and movement technique that is spinal cord centered. And in the culture, in Mu culture, we believe that the human akasha is within the spinal cord. And if we can retrieve the information from the spinal cord, we have access, just like as you're sharing, as not just the access we have to our own like mitochondrial line or the lineage, the genetic lineage, but also the cosmic lineage as well. So the doctrines of the universe. And we have 33 vertebrae, and which means that there are 33 unique codes as we go up the spinal cord. And as we read those 33 codes, it comprises a composition and a choreography of what it truly means to be a human being. And so spinal hygiene is really important in the Mu culture. It's definitely something that has been important in my own family. And for me, when I was about 5 years old, the traditional method or protocol of hanai is that at the time of 5 years old, that's when you would be gifted back to your birth parents. And that's what happened to me. And my parents were not like my grandmother. My parents lived a very Western life and had other fascinations and ideas of what it meant to, be a family unit. And so I was in a way severed from what I had remembered with my grandmother. It wasn't until I went through different kinds of traumas in my own life that I began an inquisition of how I could release myself or integrate the trauma so that they wouldn't be so pronounced in my life, because I noticed that they were preventing me from doing so many things, to the point where I even became an opiate drug addict because of I would say, that trauma that sort of just took over. Now, in that process of knowing that the life I was living wasn't fulfilling for me, I recall my grandmother. By this time in my 20s, my grandmother had hala, she had, transcended. But I just remember that my grandmother instilled in me such valuable information that I consciously decided to return to it. And when I did, the iwi kua mo'o, the spinal cord, was something that was very loud and pronounced that came forth to me. And thus I began my own remembrance and fluency of the spinal cord of the iwi kua mo'o. And that's pretty much where I am now, is also taking my own experience of refining my fluency of the spinal cord and then transferring it and hopefully inspiring others to become activated as well.
That's incredible. I notice on your Instagram that you have a daily practice that is activating energetics, mainly focused on the spinal column. Is this one of the reasons why you do that, and why you continue to share it, really to inspire us? Because it's as the more we are exposed to it, more, the sooner we cop on how important it is. And it's working for me. I seem to be called to start doing that and being consciously aware of how important it is to keep moving the entire torso. Tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, yeah. And perhaps I would love to share with everyone that for some context, I would love to share there's codes within each vertebrae of the 33 vertebrae, and there's tones to it. And I would love to just share the tones so that perhaps the listeners, you can even perhaps feel your own vertebrae sort of come to life in a way. We would start with the huelo, or the very tailbone, and then we work our way all the way up to the cervical vertebrae, which is that which is in the throat. But the brain masses and glands are considered actually part of the cervical vertebrae. And so when we honor the vertebrae within the throat, we're also honoring the brain masses and glands. And so if everyone would journey with me, allowing ourselves to drop, drop, drop all the way down, inward gaze to the iwikuo mo'o, to the spinal cord, dropping all the way down to the coccyx, the tailbone. And then as I utter these 33 tones, we will journey up. Journey with me now. Ka, lu, ko, ha, li, on, ki, va, I, mi, ku, ma, she, gra, esh, un, ja, hesh, jut, gol, ampat, set, nut, resh, vo, s. Imanut, geest, ut, hex, ama, ra. With the utterance of that ra, we feel the opening of that crown. And then we feel that that channel is now accessible. We have this clear cord that is running out of the top of our head in our crown and at the bottom of our feet. And now we are in the affluence with the rest of the cosmos. There's no separation. We open that channel by uttering the tones. Now, when we come into recognition of those tones, recommendations are going to be asked of us. Recommendations have been asked of me, and that's why movement can be so important with the iwikuo, the spinal cord, so that whatever disruptions we have at any part within the spinal cord, we can come into a resolution of. And so this would require that we all come into a kind of, I would say, ability to truly be in the body, to really feel the body. One of the core principles of Ulu, and this is something that the elders have taught me when I was very young, is that before you can spiritualize, you must first materialize. And so we come into a proper materialization, and then we go into spiritualization. And this is, Julia, even rational because spiritualization can't even exist if there's no material. That's the basic protocol. And so coming into the body, being able to scan the body, read the body, and then have negotiations with the body. And the same thing happens within the spinal cord. We can feel which spinal cord, which vertebrae may have specific disruptions, and then we can do adjustments on ourselves. I, of course, have access to these actual codes. And so I actually know what some of the spinal cord, the specific vertebrae actually represent as these energetics. That's not, I would say, necessary because you can come into your own fluency. Of course, it is super helpful to have certain codes. If I may give an example, sister.
Yes, because I find these energetical incisions are universal across the board, right? So please go ahead.
Yes. So the spinal cord is categorized in 3 different sections. And this is important because the 3 different sections represent energetic feminine, energetic masculine, and energetic androgyny, or holistic. We begin with the coccyx, the sacral, the lumbar. Those 3 are considered one unit, and that's energetic feminine. So because the energetic feminine represents the coccyx, sacral, lumbar, that's establishment. And I'm reminded of the symbol, the archaic symbol of feminine energy, which is the upside down capital T, which is a symbol for autonomy. And so we begin in autonomy. Of course, autonomy means my right to exist. And we all must make that proclamation. I have a right to exist. That is Earth Mother energy. We are now established. Belonging has been established. I feel it's so important to continuously share that message because if we take cues from patriarchy tells us that we have to earn our belonging. And that's what we're all doing, it seems. And, if someone were to ask me like, okay, Ke'oni, what is patriarchy to you? That would be my response, earning. It's all about earning. But with unihipili, or that first section of the spinal cord, unihipili, it's all about affirming belonging. That first code, which would be coccyx 4, C4, which is the very tip of the spinal cord, the tailbone, it's homeostasis. That code, which is ka, it's the code of homeostasis. Homeostasis can be translated as being in balance. And even the shape of the coccyx vertebrae is an upside down triangle. So it's like it's balancing. And that is the very first code that I must be fluent in if I can even progress to the rest of the ivikuono'o of the spinal cord.
That's fascinating. I connected to the singularity point of infinite potentials.
Yeah, most certainly. And, many of us know that feminine energy is quantum energy. And, referencing masculine can be very linear, but feminine is very quantum. And just that, it's an access point, it's the portal to all potential. And then we must find a place to which we can make those retrievals. And within the spinal cord, that would be the C4, that would be that coccyx. It's that balance. And then from there, we can make the retrievals and we pull the energy up through the spinal cord. And so we're always engaging, we're contemporizing our spinal cord at all times. In addition to it being a record keeper, we're also negotiating with it, because you and I, we also get to create a legacy. We must leave a legacy. Some of us call it our body of work, right? It's like, what is your body of work? In my culture, in new culture, that to which qualifies someone for the hala or for the transcendence is you must have a body of work. You must leave a legacy. And so, although we have this primordial blueprint within us, the spinal cord, which holds all the knowledge of the cosmos, we also get to refine it with a very specific code that is specific to you and I individually.
We add to it with our own co-creation.
Yes, yes.
Is the L4, L5 included in this first triad, or that's the next one up? The lumbar.
Yeah, and the lumbar would be the part of the unihipili, part of the feminine vertebrae. It would be the coccyx, the sacral, and the lumbar. And one thing about the lumbar vertebrae that's very interesting is that it's actually the part of our spine that carries all of our weight. And the symbolism with that is that the feminine knows how to hold. And so with the thoracic, when we come into thoracic vertebrae, which is very masculine, the masculine must allow itself to be held by the feminine. The way that I can even express that rationally of what that could mean is that the masculine must remember how to take instructions from the feminine. If my masculine's not receiving instructions from my own feminine, that means I'm going to be receiving instructions from the exterior conditions. And we can see that play out as like academia, where many of us, we live lives that can be perceived as plagiarist or fraud culture, not because we're bad people or we're inadequate in any way. It's because maybe I'm receiving instructions from the exterior conditions and I'm living out someone else's truth, not my own. And that would be a consequence of not being held by my feminine or the fluency of the lumbar.
And the wisdom that comes through it. The reason why I'm asking about L4, L5, it seems to be the most common pain point for so many people, connected to lack of self-worth, worthiness that we project onto others. They don't value us, they don't respect us, but it really comes from within. We don't know how to appreciate ourselves and we keep seeking outwardly. So I find it interesting how it correlates with not connecting to that essence and that grounded connection. And would you like to comment on that, this most common pain point, and how many people have the plates between L4 and L5 just completely vanished?
Yes.
The fluidity there is disappearing.
Yeah, and we can even go into a little investigation of that too, because those codes of L4, L5, it's Kuma, Kuma. And the Ku or the L5 is all about exposure. It- are we allowing ourselves to be exposed? Of course, the opposite of that would be I'm hiding. Because, if we perceive the world to be dangerous, then we're going to withhold a lot. And so
When I'm not worthy, I'm hiding as well. Mm-hmm.
exactly. So a lot of withholding is going to disrupt that vertebrae of L5. L4, it's intuition. And just like we're sharing, right? It's like, do I rely on the exterior conditions to give me instructions on who I need to be? Or am I allowing myself to rest within my own feminine, receiving those instructions and to have the intuition that guides me? That would be a repair of that L4. And so just as you're sharing, yeah, I also perceive that many of us have disruptions right there because we are being told that it's a dangerous world and that we need to hide, we need to withhold, or we might be condemned, all of that, right? And then also with plagiarism culture, we may just plagiarize what is coming through us from academia. We're not honoring our own truth. And then with that L4, with the intuition, we're not allowing ourselves to receive the clear instructions of our own autonomous self.
Absolutely. I want to touch on the mid spine, kind of in between the shoulder, between your wings, the
Yes.
basis of your wings. The pain point there, just from working with so many clients, it was usually connected to fear of success or fear of failure. Would you like to comment on that, if anything comes to mind?
I would love to, sister, because this has been one that I personally experienced. So this now we're thoracic would be the portion of the spinal cord that is masculine. It's called uhane. And one thing that we can perhaps even genuinely acknowledge is that the heart seems to be very present within that spinal cord. And so masculine is very heart centered. And there's one thing that we get to remember about the technology of the heart or the mechanics of the heart is that we must remember to open both the front and the back of the heart. Now, the front of the heart is the ability to give. And some of us are really fluent in that, right? We give, 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 even to the point of depletion. That may be, if we're in depletion, that may be because the back of the heart is calcified or shut, and that's our ability to receive. And the reason why I'm inspired to share that is because the world and patriarchy does have this inability to receive because somehow that connects to inadequacy. I'm not allowed to ask for help. I have to do everything on my own. Otherwise, I'm going to be deemed inadequate and incompetent. And so we may be giving a lot and maybe even for selfish reasons, right? For accolades. I do so much. I need the applause. But the back of the heart is completely calcified and shut. And so we end up in depletion, which then takes us to bitterness and resentment. For me, one of the codes that is in that wingspan area is T7, and that's Jut. And T7 is the code of mirth. Mirth. Now, I've had disruptions in mirth in Jut, and it's because I've noticed that I will look for problems that don't really exist. And that seems to be systemic within the cultures. We're not celebrating enough. Nothing is ever good enough for us to say, like, wow, time to just enjoy and celebrate. And so perhaps with that code of mirth, there's a disruption because we're not honoring, where maybe some audience have been like how I have been, which is looking for problems that don't just exist, addiction to crisis, to drama.
It's a way of self-sabotaging unconsciously.
Yeah, yeah, most certainly. Sister, maybe this will be helpful to the audience as well, because I know that you're familiar with the codes. Perhaps if I just go up and share with the audience the actual quality, the actual emotional quality of each one, so it can give kind of references to like, wow, if this is telling us what creates the composition of a whole human, yeah. So if I may, sister.
Yes, go ahead.
Mahalo. So, starting with the coccyx, remember the coccyx is the feminine, and it includes coccyx sacral lumbar. That's all the feminine complex of the vertebrae. Then we go into thoracic, which is very masculine. Thoracic is, those vertebrae that's in the heart space area. And then we graduate to what we call aumakua, and aumakua is our holistic self or androgynous self. And that's the vertebrae that's within the neck. And then also remember, it extends to include the brain glands and masses, including, of course, pituitary and pineal gland, which is super important. And
Brilliant.
so when we start all the way, once again, at Ka, at homeostasis, I'm going to work our way up. Presence, belonging, replication, psychic potential, transmitting port, permeability, discernment, diplomacy, coming into the lumbar, exposure, intuition, inquiry, emotional integration, confidence. The code of confidence is the gift to which the feminine gifts the masculine, because now from confidence, we come into thoracic vertebrae. In thoracic, we begin with humility. That is the first code of the masculine, is
Wow.
humility, which reminds me, we must allow ourselves to receive from the feminine proper instructions. That's the first code of thoracic vertebrae, is humility. We move our way up. Objectives, inquiry, ingenuity, rhythm, mirth, sensuality, devotion, replication, permeability, celebration, emotional release. Emotional release is the crown jewel of the thoracic vertebrae. That is what the masculine gifts into that holistic space. We begin in the holistic space with involution, the code of involution. And I love, Julia, when we come into the cervical, it becomes very poetic. And maybe the audience has noticed when we're in the thoracic, it was very practical, right? Very practical, ingenuity, objectives, inquiry, very practical. We come into the cervical, the Almakua, and it gets very poetic. It begins with involution. We move up to C6. It's song, the code of song, miracles, awe, release, transcendence, and then that C1, the very crown of the cervical and the entire complex, is the word that is not spoken. It's an energy that raw, it's an energy that there's no, I would say, appropriate way to describe it. And so it's the word that has no word.
Absolutely brilliant. I want to pause on the T1 at the base of the neck, the emotional release, because that's another pain point that is so common for so many people, the pain in the neck. Who is the pain in the neck? And it's usually with people who don't express the true frustration of the boundary that they need to express with whoever is their nearest and dearest. Would you agree that that's how it can manifest then? When we feel the pain in the neck, especially T1, I find it fascinating that for you, the code word is emotional release.
Absolutely, because it has a lot to do with our ability to express ourselves. My kupuna, my elders said something to me when I was 3 years old that, thank goodness I was able to retrieve that as an adult, because it really changed my dynamic with how I engage with people. But my kupuna said, boy, they always call me boy, don't assume we know how to love you. You get to teach us.
Oh, wow.
And just as you're sharing with this emotional release in T1, it's like, can the masculine be expressive and say, this is how I'm harmed and this is how I'm loved. Help me, please. And then that's, of course, something that revolutionized my life, is when I was able to do that. I was able to be vulnerable enough to, of course, share with people how I'm loved, but also to let people know clearly of how I'm harmed. And of course, the risk therein is that when I share with someone how I'm harmed, they also have instructions on now how to harm me. But that's part of the risk, right? That's emotional release isn't just what's favorable or preferential, it's everything. And that would be what would denote a healed masculine or a mature masculine, is when there's no longer favoritism in the way to which I express myself. There's no performances.
Beautiful. So on your website, people can access this very information that you just shared as a way of introducing these potent concepts and teachings, so they can access a portion of it for free on pohala.net, right? I'm going to include the link.
Yes.
And then if it speaks to you, if it calls you, then you can dive in, going much deeper on the topic through the membership portal. There's guidance through your website on all that. Is that right?
That is correct, sister. And that the movement comes in because it is very active. Wulu is very active, and it's just that. It's we're remembering how to flex and move and incite and stimulate all those vertebrae, which correlate to those specific codes. And so part of coming into energetic hygiene of the spinal cord is, of course, how to allow it to become flexible and pliable once again. And it also includes breathing techniques as well, so that we can refresh the channel that is the spinal cord.
Perfect. Would you say that it is absolutely important or vital to first address and release the denser energetical knots that are stuck inside the spinal column before one is allowed to access the deep wisdom and love that is also in the records? Or have you in your community seen the grace of experiencing the divine blueprints, and then that informed kind of looking backwards at what's there to be now released in a much maybe faster way? Can you
Yeah.
comment?
Yeah, I would say it's just as good to just show up and without any previous knowledge, and just begin to move it, and then you'll become aware of what really is beginning to want to reveal itself to you as blockages. And then also, right, sister, sometimes we can also feel the vertebrae where it feels good. It feels like the vertebrae that feels good. Like, wow, I have fluency in that. Right? For some people, they'll notice that the entire unihipili, the feminine complex, sacral, lumbar, coccyx, they feel so grounded. It's likely because all those codes of the feminine are in fluency. There's a proficiency that has already been established, and then as we go through the process, you'll be more aware of that which is asking for some attendance.
Yes, brilliant. I was contemplating, why is it that some people go through addressing trauma first, this dissecting that fully, really spending time with it, and then some people are not really wired that way. They go and let the alignment with peace through meditation or breath work help them rewire the trauma conditioning. And perhaps we can find the answer in astrology, where maybe people who have moon and Mercury, their mind and their emotion in the element of air, very analytical, they're wired as the first category, and then others just don't really need that and really let the divine intelligence of the peace and alignment do the work for them. Like many ways lead to Rome, right? Many paths lead to Rome.
That's a good point, sister. I'm moon and rising Scorpio, so I don't have a problem going into the discomfort, right? So but you're right. People are wired in very different ways. My encouragement is always to just get in the body, whatever that takes to come back into the body. Something I want to share with you and the audience is maybe we're not aware of, but interesting things happen in the age of Pisces. One thing that happened in the age of Pisces, which first I just want to say I think is amazing. It's so great that this occurred, but there are severe consequences, and that is the age of enlightenment. Now, what the age of enlightenment kind of resulted in that many of us maybe aren't discussing is that it took us out of our body. We're in thought, we're in rhetoric, and many of us have not returned to the body since the age of enlightenment, and which can lead us to live impractical lives or live in dissociative fantasy, where yes, there is this desire to come into healing or to come into fluency of my own autonomy, but it may be impractical because you must first be in the body in order for that to actually be applied to one's life. And I see this so much with, just observing is that there is genuine interest in wanting to receive information, but there may not be equal parts interest in actually applying it to one's life. And that's why I always say, first, get in the body, whatever that means to you, just get in the body. Then we can start from this practical place so that whatever we receive from the spinal cord, whatever it reveals to us, we can also apply it to our lives.
Thank you. That's so important to recognize. And by divine design, the complementary sign to Pisces is Virgo, which is about being practical in the here and now and focusing on the body.
I love how that works, right, sister? It's like the opposite is like this guide, this like necessary guide, right?
Yeah, I love Marta Alder-Hein's recent video where she pointed out and it's actually shifted my terminology now. Instead of referring to these signs as opposing, almost as if in conflict, rather start referring to them as complementing, supporting each other, right?
Yeah, the complementary sign. Yeah, sister. Yes, the complementary sign of Pisces is Virgo.
So speaking of astrology, I found the most potent healings occurred for my clients in relation to ancestral work when the either moon or any of the planets were in the sign of either Capricorn or Cancer or Pisces. So Capricorn for accessing the father's lineage or the masculine expression in our codes, in our lineage. Cancer for accessing the maternal lineage or the feminine expression in both our lines, and Pisces for easier access to the deep subconscious and the collective conditioning of our ancestral wiring. So we can always leverage these when people like to pay attention to astrological alignments. And within a few days, as we publish this video, we're going to have a full moon in Capricorn, which is really good, potent time for something like that. You can truly leverage it. It really boosts our ability to go through something like that. And it's almost as if, well, not almost as if, the collective will be called to do something like that. And the complementing sign to Capricorn is Cancer. We had new moon in Cancer at the beginning of this lunar cycle. So I hope, really, this was the reason why I arranged this call to happen at the beginning of July, is to inspire as many people as possible to take time and create the sacred space for going deep within, accessing the deep ancestral wisdom, right? And I want to point out that for many people who come from really dense, heavy family energetics, they want to run away at the thought of connecting with their ancestors because it's so traumatized. So I want to invite you to recognize the difference between the more recent ancestral lineage, which could be many generations, and the difference between the deep ancestors, the original divine human design that is not conditioned by any of the trauma that happened in the recent eras, the deep ancestors. And I had the beautiful grace of God experience of my deep ancestors coming to me energetically with their song, and the frequency of that is just pure joy, love, sense of community, co-creating something meaningful and in complete harmony, complete alignment with natural order of existence. So remember your deep ancestors, their codes, their memories live inside your bones. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautifully said too, sister. I feel like a way that I perceive my ancestors, regardless of what kind of narrative that they may be subjected to, I see it as the ultimate resource. It's a resource. Here's how I want to share this. The word that I've been sharing in this interview is iwi kua mo'o, and that's our word for spinal cord. Now, if we translate that word, iwi kua mo'o, it actually literally means dragon bone of succession.
Dragon bone off.
Succession.
Gotcha.
Succession. So here's something really unique about the dragon energy, which the primary feminine energy, which some call the big wing, is in our culture called uli. And uli is this primordial feminine energy that its existence allows for panna, the first masculine energy. Panna means beat or heartbeat. So rhythm or our activity could only come from this primordial feminine dragon energy. The dragon has a very unique skill that people are afraid of, but it's actually very, I mean, gosh, Julie, I'm trying to think of a word.
Sovereign.
There's the skill of the dragon is it breathes fire. And a lot of people may be afraid of that. But here's what breathing fire does, and this is the skill of that primordial feminine energy, is that it incinerates all impurities. Now, what does incinerate mean? It means it reduces something to its purest form. And that's that primordial dragon energy. And so when we name our spinal cord dragon bone of succession, that means that you and I, as the contemporary leaders of the lineage, we have the skill to incinerate that which is not of the greatest good of the lineage. And so whatever I detect within the lineage, as I incinerate it, I am returning it to its purest form, because this follows the laws of thermodynamics, as everything does and perhaps must. That energy cannot be created or destroyed. It must be transmuted. And that's the energy of Uli, of that feminine dragon, is that it transmutes all energy by reducing it and refining it back to its purest form. So many of us who have these disruptions within the lineage, and maybe even some shame or whatever that comes up, I love to remind myself, as I remind others, why don't you incinerate it? Why don't you incinerate it? Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Reduce it back to its purest form. And that's what we do in all the 33 vertebrae. When we find a disruption, we're incinerating it. That's how we create that proper hygiene. And incinerating it, of course, is not destroying it. That's impossible. That's fantastical for us to think that that's never going to happen again, or we're just going to look away. That's only going to cause more problems. We must transmute it. And the power of Uli, that dragon, is to transmute it by reducing it back to its purest form.
Beautiful. Thank you. I wanted to also mention the recognition of cycles and potency of certain transits, in particular in connection to planet Uranus. There's been a lot of research done by Barbara Han-Clough in connection to Uranus activating our spinal column, the awakening of the Kundalini energy spontaneously for many people, but it's not that spontaneous if you see that Uranus is smack on your natal sun or ascendant or in aspect to certain planets. So if anyone is following astrology, if you look at your transits, it's my case. At the moment, I have Uranus approaching my ascendant right now, and a lot of my focus, naturally, even without me knowing about all this, was to start paying attention to your spine and start working with the breath work and go within and really tap to the magic that is there, because it is required for the journey that's ahead, for the path that's ahead, and the experience that are coming. So
I
that may
love
relate.
I love that you're sharing this, Julia, because for me, that the Uranus energy has a lot to do with electricity. And of course, the spinal cord is this electrical circuit. And when we bring in all these qualities, right, such as confidence, inquiry, integration, devotion, sensuality, these are all electrical compositions. And in order for us to have a proper circuit, all of these, of course, must be online, so to speak. And I love that you're bringing in this presence of Uranus and how it's perhaps promoting us to come back into proper electrical circuitry.
And it's a liberator, right? And in essence, when we do this, when we go through this experience, we become liberated from the impurities and the conditionings that were limiting us, right?
Yeah, and which ties us back right to Ibi Cuomo and that dragon who reduces something, insinuates it back to its purest form by the power of that electrical circuitry.
I would love for you to comment on the alpha and the omega potency between the first point of the spinal column at the coccyx and the top, and what it means when you start moving the energy so fast that you cannot even notice at some point where is the beginning, where is the end, and it becomes alpha and the omega, and what can happen then. Have you had that experience?
Yes, sister, yes. There's something in the art of Ulu called Wat Et. Wat Et, and it literally means alpha omega in the Mu dialect. Wat is alpha, it is omega. Now, when we begin our practice of Ulu, and we begin to flex and massage and adjust the spinal cord and that electrical circuit to which we're creating, the movement is going up and down, up and down. That's part of the adjustment. And initially, when it's going up and down, the speed to which it is moving, we can measure it, right? This is point A, that's point B, right? Alpha, omega, it's going up and down. Now, when we go further into the design of Ulu, and when all 33 vertebrae are not clogged, that's the key. If any of the vertebrae are clogged, that means that it's not going to be able to have that affluence, that proper speed that takes us to the Wat Et. Now, when there's no clogs and it's moving at such high rapid speeds, it can't be measured anymore. All we see is a beam of light. And even just like for the audience to picture that, just imagine like a ball of light moving up and down, and it's slow at first, and then start to accelerate it to the point where it's so fast, you don't see the actual movement, you just see the beam of light. So that is Wat Et. That's where we can make ultimate retrievals. And I'm glad that you brought that up, sister, because for many of us, when we go into the art of Ulu and reading the spinal cord, it may be a process of corrections because we're attending to all the clogs. And that may be where we all get to begin. And then once the clogs are removed and we can experience the affluence of the circuitry within the spinal cord, then we can achieve Wat Et, where that beam of light is actually representative of quantum energy. Of course, it's within quantum energy that we can make the retrievals. And I believe we do this with quantum superposition. And that's how plants receive, the photosynthesis, is that they achieve their own Wat Et, and then they make a decision on what they want to receive that is for the betterment of it. We can do the same thing. We can make the retrievals in that quantum realm and then pull through whatever gets to be pulled through that is for the betterment of the self, and then, of course, all of humanity as well.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense. Do you believe that your lineage was fluent, or is it known to you that your lineage was, because it was fluent in this understanding through practice, they were able to retain the memories 1017 generations back. Would this be part of the passing?
I believe that the reason why it had landed within me is not so much that it was practiced, but it was preserved. And so there likely have been many generations where it was not practiced at all, but the information, the data was preserved and then transferred. And,
Mm.
that's why part of Ulu, when we go into Ulu, you'll notice that many of the designs are repetition of movements. Some people compare it to Kundalini, and I just like to share, like, I don't know Kundalini, so I can't speak on behalf of Kundalini, so I can't make that comparison. But Ulu, we do movements in repetition over and over and over again, because that ensures a kind of transference. Here's how I want to share it about the importance of repetition is that we perceive to exist in the linear realm. And I do believe that the linear realm is real. It's real. And of course, that means it's also purposeful. But one thing that I must attend to in order to achieve that quantum or that what et is I have to provide a kind of safety for the linear. If I don't provide safety for the linear is going to attempt to challenge me. The greatest way in order to apply safety to the linear is patterns. Patterns. Provide the linear with patterns to which it can predict, and it will release its grip. That's the part of what et is when the linear itself says, I trust you. And it lets go, and boom, we're in quantum. And here's what's so good too, is because the linear is now an observer of quantum, meaning it's not intervening, that to which I pull out of quantum, the linear is available to receive it. It's called a contribution, right? And all of our bodies of works are contributions, but in order for the contribution to be received by others, it must come through and forth this linear world as well. It must be made into a kind of pattern. And so with Ulu, when we're in breathing and movement techniques over and over again, and this could be for 60 minutes, for 3 hours, and for advanced Ulu, we're in movement and breathing consistently for 12 hours. And that allows for the linear to release its grip, allow us to make retrievals. And when we come back and bring forth our retrievals, the linear is not challenging it. Rather, it receives it and distributes it.
Such a brilliant advice. Thank you. Because my audience is focused on astrology, what comes to mind, I want to highlight that, yes, not everyone may feel called to commit to this level of practice that is dedicated and daily and at certain hours, so that we can create the trust and condition the body for an epic experience. But there are people who, in their natal charts, perhaps if they look at their fourth house of their ancestors, their roots, there are many people that have multiple planets like Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, and any other like stellium of planets in a house of your ancestors. It's likely that you're naturally inclined and guided to something like this, because based on your energetics of your natal chart, you were destined, or your soul agreed to do this type of potent work that liberates generations before and generations forward. So if you recognize that in your own chart, I'm grateful if you are guided to this video, and really hope it'll inspire to explore the content that Ke'oni has on his website. First, just dipping your toes in with the free content, which is brilliant. Already I felt activations as I was just reading through it all. And then the deeper layers, really, when you feel your heart expanding, calling you into it, it'll be well worth it.
Mm.
I've also created a course called Ancestral Healing Journey. And it's just a 3-part series where I first explain what I've witnessed over the many years in terms of how our body's talking to us through pain, and different parts of our body hold different messages. So, for example, pain in your knees would be negative association made with change through our ancestral trauma. So we want to dissolve that, so we stop sabotaging our way forward. The pain points that we mentioned throughout the spinal column, and so much more. I also address the most common self-sabotaging patterns to healing or to transformational experience like this, where you're letting go of these things. I believe those need to be addressed in order to create that sense of safety for the ego, to allow, to open the gates to transformation. And then guided healing journey, where we really bring the energy and conscious attention to every aspect of the vertebrae of the entire spinal column. Bring the light of your attention, of your consciousness in, and address the differences between negative emotion that was felt at a time of trauma of an ancestor, the conflicting instincts that were attached to it, because when we are in point of trauma, usually multiple instincts are triggered. And when trauma is not resolved, when we don't receive a resolution and return to peace, that is then locked. And the positive need that the ancestor had at the time of the traumatic event is also enmeshed with all that. And that becomes this energetical knot somewhere in our body. So I'm using this terminology, which I want to pay respect to Yvette Rose, that has done a huge amount of research in terms of metaphysical anatomy healing, where when these are addressed, when you're in this deep guided state, you feel literally the energetical clearing. And then I call on the deep ancestors, the divine mother, father codes. And there's this beautiful imagery so people can realize what really are they connecting as they are tapping into the depths of the records inside their bones in the spinal column. So that's also available. And anyone who's struggling to pay their bills, please contact me and I'll give you complimentary access. I just feel it's so important that as many of us as possible focus on deep healing, so that we don't have to witness the madness in the world getting worse. Whatever we can do to help shifting the inner world so that the outer world can have a positive shift too. Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, well, first, thank you so much for all of that you're offering, sister. And I would agree with you that ancestral healing is so important. And of course, the very first step I feel in anything ancestral is to tap in to the ancestry. And I feel like that may be a big disruption for so many of us who don't feel connected to our ancestry. And for you to give yourself consent, and I always share like that, the first step is to consent yourself access. Because when I consent myself access, I'm now locatable. Remember with patriarchy, it's all about earning. So, we're always doing. We're forgetting that we can also receive. And so when I consent myself to receive connection to my ancestry, wow, things start to show up, right? And then I become fluent just therein by offering my consent. A lot of what you're sharing too about the work that you've been doing and the woman that you had mentioned too, the sensation I felt as you're sharing all of that, of course, is buoyancy. And that is the Kame'anui, or that's the essential thing within the spinal cord in order to have proper hygiene of the spinal cord. I would say with any of the skeletal system is for it to be held in a kind of buoyancy. So my kupuna, my elders would always say, there's only one requirement for a proper witch or warlock, and that is to levitate. And we feel into, right, levitation is like, oh, of course, look, with all the movies, like everyone's got to fly and stuff like that. They're like, no, energetically, you got to be buoyant. That's the code of levitation. And that's the requirement for any proper witch or warlock.
Thank you for bringing that in. I wanted to, you're reminding me, I wanted to touch on the plasma and the fluid, the liquid that our spinal column literally can swim in and levitate in. It's on your website. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just to add on that.
Yes. So, of course, the cerebral spinal fluid, we can consider that as the human essential oil. And that is actually what carries our skeletal system, our spinal cord, in a kind of buoyancy. It suspends it. And so having, of course, healthy cerebral spinal fluid is also very important. Now, what happens within, remember, we're talking about the watt-et. So when the oscillation is going so quick, what happens is the cerebral spinal fluid is pressed onto the pineal and the pituitary gland. And something happens there, and it's called piezoelectricity. Because the pineal and the pituitary gland are actually encapsulated by tiny microscopic crystals. Of course, when you apply fluid onto crystals, something magical is going to happen. And that's exactly what's happening. It's called piezoelectricity. And we are just talking about, right, the electricity of the spinal cord. What happens is within that piezoelectricity is the pineal and the pituitary begin to secrete fluids themselves. So now you have two different fluids, pineal, masculine, pituitary, feminine. They're now blending with the cerebral spinal fluid. They pass through something called the claustrum that is in our brain, and then it all gets blended together. That is what we call the kulukurut. The kulukurut. And you want that to drip down the spinal cord because just the kulukurut, that liquid, that elixir, if it can touch every single vertebrae, just it making contact is going to activate every single vertebrae. And they'll just be boom, 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 boom. And then you begin to just function holistically. There's so many different wonderful consequences of functioning holistically. And of course, one is the absolute total, I would say, general well-being and health of the physical body. There's all these myths and stories, right, about our ancestors who lived these incredible lifespans. And we're like, how can you, right? We're human beings, we're organic, we decay. Like, how is that possible? Well, now we're beginning to remember some of the methods to which our ancestors retrieved. And most of it's biological, right? Yes.
There are yogis in India. There are records of a man who lived on the manna dripping without needing to eat for decades. He was sustained through the process that you described. And sadly for him, he was then locked in institutions that just wanted to run all kinds of tests, completely not understanding, trying to understand. Like it's a real thing.
Wow, it most certainly is. And of course, that has a lot to do with our environmental factors too, just like you shared, right? If someone exists like that, the curiosity to sort of infiltrate someone, study them, or try and like crack their code, right, will disrupt what is required for that individual to be in that kind of state. And so, just as you're sharing a little bit earlier about when we can come into a reconciliation within, right, then that can mirror on the external conditions, including the way that we interact and engage with other people, where it's more compatible for us to allow such miraculous things to exist without scrutiny. And I'm reminded of the linear, right? When we go into that patterning, that sacred patterning of Ulu, the linear consensually releases the grip, which then allows for the retrieval into the quantum, and not just the allowance of that, but also the allowance to bring something through, and the linear consents to distributing that. And so I feel like that's such a sacred relationship of mutual respect. And I feel like I just had to say that right now because it feels important that, of course, we must respect ourselves, right, sister? And I don't know if that's so prevalent in the world right now that we can truly, honestly say, I do respect myself, but then our behaviors would suggest otherwise. And so once again, get in the body. What is it telling you? What is it sharing with you? Where are the disruptions? Where are the contradictions that are happening?
Yes. What I love about the work that you present is the fast way or connecting us to the archetypal gifts and graces that are locked in every single vertebrae. So like 33 paths or 33 energetics that we are designed to embody in our natural state of being. So even just reading the material, kind of meditating on it and breathing those words in alone can create the ripple effect of positive transformation. I believe we are here for. I really do believe that we incarnated on Earth at this time to help with resolving, dissolving the cycles of trauma, ending the cycle with us, and awakening the divine human potential that Earth is now holding space for, as she herself is ascending to higher frequency, which is measured even scientifically now.
Right.
To tell the changes in her pulse, in her rhythm.
And apparently we're now less than 24-hour days. we're spinning at such a rate that for the first time we're actually our day is below 24 hours. And so you're absolutely right about the planet is in this ascension process as well, which means that we're also compatible with that.
That's really interesting, because I've now spoken to a handful of sisters who in a span of last 3-4 months, all of their cycles are becoming shorter and regularly shorter. So from 28 days to 26 days, or from 26 days to 24 days. And it's the inside was that we are perceiving faster rotation of the cycle of the planet. So that makes sense.
Yes, sister, which is like that Wat-et, right? Where the speed gets so rapid that we can no longer measure it anymore. Perhaps that's where we're destined to be. And I want to share thank you so much for, reminding us that we have access to these codes. They're these qualities, these electrical circuits that we can resource. And just again, to remind everyone, it's even a matter of just looking at them and consenting to them. Right? Like, for instance, homeostasis, I consent. Presence, I consent. Belonging, I consent. Consent is the primary law of the universe that we could remember. And once we honor that once again, I think that will definitely cultivate a whole different quality if we can return to a primary law that is consent. So everything to which I feel I deserve, then I must consent to it. And then also being very aware of the things that I'm consenting to that are harmful to me.
Amazing. Thank you. I look forward to applying that immediately. Ke'oni, we could go on and on. I'm conscious of the time and our next commitments. Is there anything else that you would love to share? Things I didn't ask and could have? Any final words for our audience?
Well, I just mahalo you. Thank you so much. And on behalf of my kupuna, my elders, and my grandmother, thank you for offering the space for us to share the culture and of Ulu and of Iwi Kuomo, the spinal cord. I feel like I would love to just recite one more time the codes, the tones of the spinal cord. And actually, if we take all these tones and we put them all together, there's actually a narrative. There's actually something that can be shared, and I can translate that in English.
Yes.
So first, I would love for all of us once again, inward stare into our spinal cord, resting into our spinal cord. We are in recognition of the foundation that is the Unihipili, coccyx sacral lumbar, the hero of the masculine in the thoracic, and the cervical 7, which is our exalted holistic self. Maybe even breathing once or twice into that Iwi Kuomo, and then allowing ourselves to drop all the way to the coccyx, to that point of balance within the Unihipili, the feminine. And I will utter the tones as we journey up. Journey with me now. Kaluko halion hiva imi kuma shegera esh unja jut gol ampat seit nut resh vo imunut geiste ut hex ama ra. As I assemble all of those tones and codes, it does offer us a beautiful narrative, and that is the scattering and gathering as to fulfill the polarizing landscape, resulting the expression of the mother, whom instructs the breath and the light to produce the animated self, presented as the reckless gods or wide open laughter. as to determine the high potential in the convergence of the code of levitation and self-reflective love. Aloha ma, aloha ma, aloha ma.
Thank you. I felt the song, I felt the blessing, I felt the joy. Thank you, Ke'oni, and thank you all who commit to healing, remembering, and embodying the wholeness, the holiness of our soul. I hope this sharing will serve you, and I'll look forward to connecting again next time. Much love.
Aloha.